It's one of the coolest stories. One of the most,
Yeah.
I mean, Don and I, it's like one of those oh wow stories.
I almost wish it happened.
And let's bring on Mike Florio and let him tell you what it is. And Mike, it's between the Browns and Jim Harbaugh. Tell us what almost happened.
Well, one of the beauties of being here in Indianapolis for the Scouting Combine, you never know what you're going to catch wind of, and then the question becomes, because I knew this was going to get out, it was a race to get the information nailed down before someone else got it and someone else reported it. But I'm told through multiple sources, and I guarantee you this is accurate, not to be confused with our stories that aren't accurate, but the Browns and the 49ers had a deal in place that would have sent Jim Harbaugh to Cleveland as the head coach for multiple draft picks. I don't know whether or not cash would have been involved like it was 12 years ago when John Gruden went from the Raiders to the Buccaneers, but there were multiple draft picks involved. The agreement was in place between the teams. Harbaugh ultimately backed out of it.
Now, why would the 49ers even consider trading Harbaugh?
Well, remember at some point last season, November time frame, there were reports that Trent Baalke, the GM of the 49ers, and Jim Harbaugh don't see eye to eye, and I started to pick around at some of that, and it was clear to me that there is real friction between these two men. Now, some in the organization chalk it up to the natural butting of heads that happens between alpha males, and somebody even suggested to me that the same thing goes on between John Harbaugh, the Ravens coach, and GM Ozzie Newsome. But I also was getting the sense that maybe there's something more to it. Jim Harbaugh is a very hard guy to deal with from a competitive standpoint. He is so obsessed with winning that it can create some interpersonal impediments. And there was talk of the Texas Longhorns being interested. I was told the 49ers would have let him go if that's what he wanted to do. And I can't help but wonder whether this near trade was partially a gesture by the 49ers of, hey, Jim, if you got a problem being here, if you don't like the way we do things, if you don't want to be part of this, we'll trade you somewhere else. We'll let you be coached somewhere else. And ultimately, for whatever reason, he decided not to leave.
So the organization was willing to trade him away. He didn't want to leave. But this sounds like eventually this is going to end up in divorce, right? Usually we talk about teams when they want to trade a player, how it's difficult for that player to stay. I mean, how is he supposed to stick around knowing the organization almost traded him?
Well, I can see it going one of two ways. I mean, he was clearly involved in the discussions, and it could be that this brought everything to a head, and then moving forward, if you have like a lingering issue with a friend or a family member, and it builds and it builds, and finally you have it out, and then after you've had it out, everything's fine. Maybe this brought everything to a head, and Harbaugh decided, you know what, okay, I understand there's been issues, I understand we have to work on some things, but this is where I want to be. And they kind of renew their vows and go forward. Now, saying that, the reaction so far from the 49ers has been silence officially. And the 49ers have not responded to my calls or my emails. Usually they do. And they've leaked through NFL media, which obviously they partially own. They've leaked. Unnamed sources with the 49ers say the story is completely false. Why would you not attach your name to a response to a story that you deem to be false? I submit because they know they can't truthfully deny it and attach their names to it. And I don't want to turn this into journalism 101, but I think any reporter that's going to go with that needs to think about what that really means, because there's no reason to not attach your name to it if it truly is false.
I was reading exactly what you're saying on Twitter. It was Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network who said that source said that it was absolutely ridiculous, and I thought the same thing as you. Well, if a team says that something is totally untrue, then why wouldn't the owner or the GM say it's totally untrue and attach their name? It doesn't make sense to have a source do it unless you don't really believe it.
Exactly. And we've seen this time and again. And Ian Rappaport was in the middle of this last year. He had the reports that Ben Roethlisberger wanted to be traded from the Steelers. And what happened? People came out on the record and said this is false. And I'm not saying that's dispositive, but when you see someone hiding behind this unnamed source thing for something that you should be standing up and saying it's false, you're kind of trying to have it both ways, and you realize that you can't say with your name attached to it that this is false. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't have gone with it. I understand the magnitude of this story. This is not something I press enter on my computer about unless I'm 100% sure it happened. I'm telling you, I'm 100% sure. Again, not to be confused with the other times when I'm 28%.
Now, Harbaugh didn't want to go. Is that because he wanted to stay in San Francisco or just didn't want to go to Cleveland?
I think it's more he wanted to stay in San Francisco, or family members wanted to stay in San Francisco. I don't know that with certainty. But regardless, he had the opportunity to go, and he chose to stay. Does that mean he's going to stay in San Francisco for 5 more years, 10 more years, 20 more years, 5 more days? I don't know. I mean, there's a chance that, and given the way the 49ers have reacted to it, there is a chance that this just spirals out of control for the San Francisco 49ers.
Very interesting. You mentioned that you're at the Combine in Indianapolis, and one of the great questions here, Mike, I want to know if you've heard anything. Is there a chance that Johnny Manziel is talking himself into being the number one pick by the Texans?
I love the homage to Peyton Manning that Johnny Manziel pulled off recently. Remember, in 1998, Peyton Manning told the Colts, if you don't take me, I'm going to whoop your butts every chance that I can get. And Manziel has essentially said that to the Texans. And just think about what happens for the Texans. If they pass on Manziel and the Jaguars take him at number 3, they got a deal with Manziel in Houston twice a year for 10 years or more. And if this guy ends up being a franchise quarterback, that is going to be a constant reminder. And the Texans already kind of went through this a little bit in the early years of Vince Young's career when he was the offensive rookie of the year, and it looked like he was going to be the real deal. Until that fell apart, I think there was a lot of hand-wringing in Houston that maybe they blew it in 2006 when they didn't take Vince Young. I think they want to avoid a repeat of that, and it could nudge them toward taking Manziel, although I'm not sure that their head coach is a guy who wants a Brett Favre type of a quarterback who kind of just does whatever happens when things fall apart.
All right, I wanted to get your thoughts on Seattle wide receiver Doug Baldwin. He had this stream of consciousness on Twitter kind of criticizing the Combine, some of the things he said. Don't be sucked into ESPN, NFL Network, and all these money-making media outlets. Their singular purpose is to entertain you, make you think something is important when it really isn't. It's not for news, it's for ratings. And he went on to really criticize how the Combine is and how it's covered.
I think I need to hire Doug Baldwin because I've been saying that kind of stuff. When Blake Bortles announced that he was going to throw and he always wanted to compete, I mean, it's like, at what point did we convince people this is a competition? This is a made-for-TV underwear Olympics that is the only thing that we have at this time of year because football's over. So we get caught up in it. We turn it on. We watch it. We want to see all the guys work out because it's good for ratings. The media applauds when a Blake Bortles says he's going to throw. They wag a finger at Johnny Manziel when he says he's not going to throw. I'm part of the money-making machine. I shouldn't knock it. But the reality is there's a huge disconnect between what we're going to see in Indianapolis and what we're going to see in September. And I think it's irresponsible for people who understand that disconnect to not say so. Doug Baldwin sees it. I see it. I submit to you plenty of other people who aren't saying it see it as well.